The tickets are $800 each, Dad said, his voice cutting through the silence like a hammer breaking glass. If you can't pay, you're not coming. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Flat. Final. As if he were talking to an employee, not his daughter. The smell of overcooked steak filled the dining room, the air thick with that familiar tension that clung to our family dinners like smoke. Mom sat at the head of the table, pretending to read the receipt from the grocery store. She always hid behind numbers when things got ugly. My younger brother Ethan smirked and raised his glass of soda like he was toasting to Dad's decree. "Guess that settles it," he said. I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was the same movie playing on repeat, different scene, same ending. Dad's kingdom, Dad's rules, Dad's golden boy sitting on a throne I helped polish. I was 28, an accountant with a steady job, a woman who paid her own rent, her own bills, her own everything. But to my father, I was still the unwanted expense. "You've got a job," he continued, slicing into his steak. "Show some pride. We can't afford freeloaders." The word stung, even though I'd heard it before. Freeloaders. As if the 4 years I worked 2 jobs through college hadn't happened. As if the student loans in my name were invisible. As if the countless times I sent money to help Mom cover Ethan's tuition were just erased. I looked at him, his graying hair slicked back his tie, still perfectly knotted even at dinner. He loved that tie. Said it made him look like a man who could be trusted. I smiled. Just a small, quiet curve of my lips. That smile wasn't agreement. It was surrender in the moment, rebellion in disguise. "Got it," I said. Dad nodded, satisfied, already moving on to discuss hotel options in New York. Mom muttered something about the weather. Ethan laughed at a text on his phone. I sat still, memorizing the way the room looked, the flickering candlelight, the clinking silverware, the small tremor in Mom's hand as she poured herself wine. That was the night I decided I was done playing their version of family. My father thought control was love. My mother thought silence was peace. My brother thought entitlement was earned, but I was starting to think independence was the only inheritance I'd ever get. The words, "if you can't pay, you're not coming," looped in my head all night like a song I couldn't turn off. By morning, the shame had burned away, replaced by something cleaner, sharper. I opened my laptop and smiled again, the same quiet smile I'd given him across the dinner table. "If I can't pay," I whispered, "then maybe you can't either." He just didn't know yet that I was done paying for his power. Have you ever been told that love should be enough, but somehow it always came with a bill attached? That was my childhood in a sentence. My father measured affection in dollars and respect in obedience. Every family gathering had a hidden invoice behind the smiles, every favor had an interest rate. I used to believe that if I just worked harder, earned more, proved myself enough, maybe I'd finally earn the kind of love that didn't need a receipt. But there's something you learn after 28 years of being told you're lucky to be tolerated. Love without respect is just control-wearing perfume. Before I go on, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to draw a line with people who were supposed to protect you? Maybe a parent who used guilt like a leash, or a sibling who thought your paycheck was family property. If that sounds familiar, then keep listening, because this story isn't just about a plane ticket. It's about the price of silence and what happens when you finally decide to stop paying it. My father, Charles Collins, was a man who believed that daughters were debts and sons were investments. He'd never say it out loud, but you could feel it in every decision he made. My mother, Margaret, perfected the art of pretending everything was fine, and my brother Ethan, well, he was the golden child, the proof that my father's methods worked. Whenever I visited home, I'd walk into the same polished living room that smelled like lemon cleaner and pride. My father's awards lined the walls, community service plaques, leadership certificates, trophies from a life spent chasing other people's approval. But in the middle of all that success, the love in our house was conditional, fragile, and expensive. The older I got, the more I saw the pattern. Money wasn't just a tool for my father, it was leverage, a way to remind everyone who was in charge. Every dollar he gave came with invisible strings, and every time I accepted help, he pulled tighter. When I finally cut those strings and moved to Denver after college, he called it betrayal. "Family stays together," he said. What he meant was, family stays under me. That's why that dinner about the tickets wasn't just another argument. It was the same battle disguised as small talk. He thought he could buy compliance the same way he bought admiration, but he didn't realize that my silence at that table wasn't fear anymore. It was calculation. This time, I wasn't going to fight his way. I was going to use the only language he respected: proof logic and consequences. So if you've ever been guilt-tripped into keeping the peace, this story is for you. Because sometimes peace isn't quiet, it's standing in the middle of the storm and saying, "Not anymore." And that's exactly what I was about to do. From the outside, the Collins family looked picture perfect. My father, Charles, ran a small but respected construction company in Denver known for his punctuality, firm handshake, and spotless reputation. My mother, Margaret, was the quiet wife who hosted Sunday dinners with practiced grace. My younger brother, Ethan, was the charming son who never heard the word no. And then there was me, the daughter who was expected to help, not to have dreams of her own. Our two-story suburban home was filled with polished oak furniture, old family portraits, and trophies with Ethan's name etched on every plaque. From the day he was born, the world revolved around him. Dad used to call him my legacy, his voice filled with pride that bordered on worship. When I was born 4 years earlier, Dad had said, "A daughter first. Good practice for when the real deal arrives." He laughed when he said it. Mom laughed too. I didn't. Growing up, I was the one who ran errands, set the table, helped Mom prepare dinner, and clapped the loudest at Ethan's baseball games. When I earned straight A's, Dad would nod politely and say, "Good, that's what you're supposed to do." When Ethan got a B, Dad took him out for ice cream, saying, "Grades aren't everything. Attitude matters more." I started realizing early that I was invisible unless I made myself useful. Dad's way of showing love was through instruction. Don't argue. Smile more. A woman's strength is in patience. That phrase echoed in our house like scripture. Mom absorbed it so deeply she didn't even flinch anymore. She would whisper to me, "It's just how he was raised, honey." His father was the same way, as if generational cruelty could be excused as tradition. Ethan, of course, thrived in that environment. He learned how to take advantage of Dad's approval and Mom's softness. By the time he turned 15, he had a new car for responsibility practice. When I turned 18, I got a new chore list because college girls need discipline. Dad said it with a wink. I remember how the joke stuck in my throat like a bone. Every dinner felt like a board meeting. Dad at the head of the table, Ethan at his right hand, Mom quietly serving, and me trying not to breathe too loudly. He would talk about business deals, about providing for the family, and about the importance of loyalty. But loyalty in our house meant silence. Disagreeing with Dad wasn't disobedience, it was betrayal. Mom once tried to stand up for me when I wanted to apply for a scholarship to a university out of state. Dad slammed his hand on the table and said, "A girl alone in another city. Absolutely not. We don't raise selfish daughters." He turned to Mom, "And stop filling her head with nonsense." That night, I heard my mother crying in the kitchen. I sat at the top of the stairs clutching my acceptance letter, and for the first time, I realized that love could sound like tears muffled behind a closed door. Ethan walked past me and grinned. "You really thought Dad would let you go," he said. "You're the helper, Emma. That's your job." He wasn't being cruel. He was just repeating what we had both been taught. As I grew older, the pattern only deepened. Ethan was praised for confidence. I was corrected for attitude. He was assertive. I was difficult. When he crashed his first car, Dad said, "Boys make mistakes. That's how they learn." When I once forgot to pay a utility bill during college, he told me that's why women shouldn't handle money. It wasn't just sexism, it was the architecture of our family. Every interaction was a blueprint of control disguised as care. My mother's silence made her complicit, but I didn't hate her for it. I pitied her. She'd spent 30 years surviving a man who believed being right was more important than being kind. I used to wonder what she dreamed about when she looked out the kitchen window after dinner. Freedom, maybe. But she never said. My father liked to say, "Family means everyone knows their place." For years, I believed mine was beneath him until the day I realized he couldn't see me because I'd been standing too low. That realization didn't come from a moment of rebellion. It came from exhaustion. Because when love feels like debt one day, the bill arrives. And when it does, you either keep paying or you walk away. I didn't know it yet, but the next chapter of my life would begin the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist. When I turned 16, I was offered a full academic scholarship to the University of Oregon. It was everything I had worked for, proof that effort mattered, that I could be something more than my father's unpaid assistant. The letter came in a thick envelope with my name printed in bold. I remember running into the kitchen barefoot, the smell of lemon polish and Sunday roast filling the air. "Dad," I said breathlessly. "I got it." He didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Got what? The scholarship. Full ride. They're offering housing too." He flipped a page, calm, as if I had said I'd passed a driving test. "You're not going." My mother froze mid-motion, spoon still hovering over the pot. "Charles, at least let her—" "No," he interrupted, his tone final. "A girl doesn't move states away. She belongs with her family until she has one of her own. You'll help your mother and keep Ethan focused." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You mean I'll stay home and take care of everything while Ethan goes off to college?" "Exactly," he said, smiling as though he'd given me a gift. "Family first." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, the paper still clutched in my hand. It felt less like an acceptance letter and more like a window that had just been slammed shut. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just went quiet. That silence, I learned, was power, because silence can be mistaken for obedience until the day it isn't. I waited 2 weeks before doing what I knew I had to. During lunch at school, I borrowed my teacher's phone and called the admissions office. I explained my family situation. The woman on the line was kind. "You can confirm your spot online," she said. "We'll email your documents." So I did. Late at night, after everyone went to bed, I used the family computer in the living room. I created my own email, filled out the forms, and hit submit. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd wake the whole house. When I got the confirmation email, I printed it and hid it between the pages of a math textbook. For months, I saved money, secretly tips from tutoring, birthday cash, spare change from errands. I opened a checking account with my own name on it. It felt like planting a flag on a mountain no one thought I could climb. Graduation day arrived. Ethan got a car. I got a pat on the shoulder. At the ceremony, Dad shook hands with every teacher, proudly mentioning his son's future. When it was my turn to walk the stage, he clapped politely like he was doing me a favor. I remember scanning the crowd, seeing Mom's small, tearful smile. She mouthed, "I'm proud of you." It almost broke me. 3 months later, I left for college. I didn't tell Dad until the night before I left. I packed my things quietly and waited until dinner. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I said. "For Oregon?" He laughed. "You'll be back by Christmas." "No," I said. "I won't." His face turned red. "If you walk out that door, don't expect a dime from me." "Good," I said softly. "I've already paid enough." He stared at me like I had spoken another language. Maybe I had. It was the language of boundaries, one he didn't understand. The next morning, I left before sunrise. Mom stood by the doorway, and her robe eyes swollen from crying. She slipped an envelope into my hand. Inside was $50 and a note that said, "For your first meal there. Love, Mom." That was the first time I felt both free and completely alone. I worked 3 jobs to stay afloat: coffee shop at dawn, tutoring in the afternoons, and tax prep at night. I sent Mom letters, but Dad never wrote back. I learned to live without approval, to survive on effort alone. Years later, when people asked what motivated me, I never said ambition. The truth was simpler. I just wanted to prove that love shouldn't feel like servitude, and that being born a daughter didn't mean being born into debt. By the time I turned 28, my life was quiet, efficient, and entirely my own. I worked as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Denver, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with creaky wooden floors, and drove a used Honda that smelled faintly of coffee and independence. My paychecks weren't huge, but every dollar was mine, and that mattered more than anything. I had learned to breathe without permission. For years, I'd kept my distance from my family. Calls from my father were rare and usually came when something was wrong. "Ethan's car broke down. Your mother's medical bills are piling up. You make good money, help us out, kid." The first time I transferred funds, I told myself it was compassion. The second time, it was guilt. By the 5th, it had become routine. I didn't realize then that my father's pride and my mother's silence were the perfect recipe for manipulation. It wasn't always money they wanted. Sometimes it was access. Once my father asked me to co-sign a business loan. Just a formality, he said. We need someone with good credit. I refused. He laughed like it was a joke, but that laugh carried the same old sting. I remember calling my therapist afterward, my voice trembling with shame. Why does saying no feel like betrayal? Dr. Keller replied. Because you were raised to believe love and compliance are the same thing. They aren't. That sentence would echo in my mind for months. Over time, I started building boundaries the way I built financial plans, carefully, logically, but firmly. I stopped sending money unless I chose to give it as a gift, not as an obligation. I began saying no without explanations. The first few months were brutal. Dad called me selfish. Mom said I was making things difficult. Ethan texted, "You've changed." They were right. I had. For the first time, I wasn't the family safety net. I was my own person. Still, guilt is a stubborn thing. Even when I didn't cave, it gnawed at me quietly, whispering that I was abandoning them. But therapy had taught me something else. Guilt isn't a compass. It's a leash. The moment you stop pulling against it, you stop moving forward. So I kept pulling. My apartment became my sanctuary. I'd light a candle after work, sit by the window, and watch the city lights blink like tiny acts of freedom. Sometimes I thought about my mother, how she'd probably still be standing at the sink, washing dishes in silence, pretending not to hear my father's voice booming from the living room. I wanted to believe she'd find her own way out someday, but deep down, I knew she wouldn't. Survival had become her habit, and habits are hard to break when you've lived your whole life afraid of shattering peace. The last time I saw my family before it all began, we were at Ethan's engagement dinner. Dad toasted to the future of our family, his glass held high. "Ethan will make a fine husband," he said proudly. Then he turned to me. "And maybe someday Emma will find a man who can take care of her too." The table laughed. I smiled politely, but inside, something went cold. I realized that no matter how much I achieved in their eyes, I'd always be the daughter who needed saving, the woman who didn't count. I drove home that night, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The truth was simple but devastating. They didn't see me as independent. They saw me as unclaimed. And I decided right then that if no one was going to claim my worth, I would. I thought the worst was behind me. I had no idea that the next time I heard my father's voice, it would be telling me to buy my own ticket or stay behind. It started on a random Wednesday morning, halfway through my second cup of coffee. My phone buzzed with a notification from a group chat I didn't recognize, Family Reunion 2025, NYC. The creator was my mother. I opened it half curious, half wary. The message read, "Exciting news, everyone. We're going to New York in June to celebrate Ethan's promotion. 10 days hotels already reserved. Dad found great deals. This is mandatory. Family comes first." My fingers hovered above the screen. Mandatory. The word felt like a command dressed as affection. Replies poured in immediately. Ethan sending champagne emojis, his fiancée Laura writing, "Can't wait." Mom replying to herself with, "So proud of my boys." My name sat alone in the thread untouched. I typed, "That sounds nice, but how much is the total cost?" No one replied. The chat went silent for a few hours, then burst alive again with talk of restaurants and Broadway shows. I was invisible again. Around lunchtime, Mom sent another message. Emma will cover her ticket, of course. $800 each. Let's not make it awkward. Everyone just confirmed flights this week. I read it twice. $800 wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't the number that mattered. It was the assumption. The decision made for me without me. The same script, different day. Ethan texted me privately. "You're fine with this, right? Mom said you offered to handle your own travel. Dad already told everyone you're coming. It'll look bad if you bail." I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. "I never offered," I typed. "When did she say that?" He replied, "Don't make this weird." It's family. You always overreact." There it was again, my rebellion reduced to oversensitivity. That evening, while the rest of the chat buzzed with itinerary updates, I opened my budgeting spreadsheet. The numbers glared back. I could afford it technically, but that wasn't the point. I'd spent years clawing my way out of the financial sinkhole my family created. Paying now meant stepping right back in. I closed the laptop and made a promise to myself no more silent sacrifices. The next day, I decided to call Dad directly, something I hadn't done in months. He answered on the third ring, his tone already impatient. "What's this about the New York trip?" I said evenly. "Who told everyone I'd be paying for my ticket?" He chuckled. "You're an adult, aren't you? You make good money. Everyone else has expenses. Your brother's saving for a wedding. So, am I being invited or invoiced?" There was a pause. "Don't be dramatic," he said finally. "It's Family Emma. You either come or you don't. Just don't make a scene." After we hung up, I sat staring at the muted TV screen. He'd made it sound so simple, like all I had to do was comply. But compliance had been my entire childhood, and I was tired of earning a place in a family that only called me when they needed something. Still, part of me hesitated. Not going would make me the villain again, the cold daughter who didn't care. Going would mean pretending nothing had changed. Either way, I'd lose. That weekend, I visited my mother's Facebook page. There it was, a post already up. "So excited. The Collins family is heading to New York this summer. My amazing daughter Emma is helping plan the trip." Blessed. My chest tightened. Helping plan. That was the lie wrapped in praise she always used to make control look like generosity. I clicked the comments friends writing. "Such a wonderful family. You raised them so well. You're lucky to have such a thoughtful daughter." The irony made my hands shake. I could almost hear my father's satisfied tone behind it all, the puppet master pulling invisible strings. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I closed the app and opened my banking app, checking every recent transaction just in case. My gut told me to be ready. Because with my family, when silence got too long, it only meant the next storm was already gathering. I didn't know it yet, but by the following Friday morning, the thunder would come in the form of 4 identical airline charges, each for $800 each under my name, and that was when the war officially began. Friday morning started like any other coffee quiet music, the faint hum of the city below my apartment window. By 9:15, I was deep into reviewing client reports when my phone vibrated 3 times in rapid succession. Then again. I frowned. 6 notifications from my bank. Purchase alert, $800 United Airlines. 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 My stomach dropped. 4 transactions. I blinked, certain it was a glitch, but the timestamps were identical. 9:12 a.m. I opened my email, and there they were. 4 flight confirmations to New York. Departing June 10th, returning June 20th. Passenger names: Charles Collins, Margaret Collins, Ethan Collins, Laura White. Payment method: my credit card. I froze my cursor hovering over the screen. The email had already been marked as read, but I hadn't opened it. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the list of names, trying to make sense of it. Then my phone buzzed again, a text from Mom. "Thank you, sweetheart. I can't believe you surprised us with the tickets. Business class, too. You're so thoughtful." The words blurred. I reread them 3 times, my hands trembling. She knew exactly what she'd done. This wasn't confusion. It was choreography. She'd timed it perfectly Friday morning when I'd be at work, distracted, unable to stop the charges. My mouth went dry. My entire chest felt like it was caving in. I dialed my bank immediately, my voice shaking as I said, "There's been unauthorized use of my credit card." The representative asked if the card had been lost or stolen. "No," I said, my tone bitter. "Just borrowed without permission." She confirmed the purchases were made using my saved card info from a previous United Airlines booking. "Do you recognize the email address used for confirmation?" I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said. "It's mine." But I didn't authorize those tickets. She processed the dispute, canceled my card, and told me to expect a fraud investigation. My professional instincts kicked in. I documented everything, screenshots, timestamps, even the texts. Then I called United directly. "Can I cancel those tickets?" I asked. "Yes," the agent said after verifying my identity. "Do you want me to notify the passengers?" "No," I said, my voice low. "Let them find out at the airport." Hanging up, I exhaled shakily, the adrenaline flooding through my veins. Then came another vibration, Dad this time. "What the hell is wrong with you?" his text read. "You embarrassed your mother. You agreed to this. Stop acting like a child." I typed back slowly, deliberately. "I didn't agree to anything. What you did is illegal." Within minutes he called. His voice thundered through the line, sharp and controlled. "Don't you dare talk to me about legalities. Your family. We needed those tickets. You can afford it." "Needing isn't the same as taking," I said quietly. "You used my account. You accessed my email. Your mother was trying to surprise everyone. You're turning this into something ugly." "You mean reality," I replied. There was a silence, then a low growl. "You always have to ruin everything. You want to be the victim." "Fine. Just remember who raised you. You owe us everything." I almost laughed. "No, Dad. I don't owe you anymore." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. This time it was fury. The kind that burns clean. I sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of my office, realizing something I should have known long ago: they would never stop taking as long as I kept forgiving. That night, I filed a police report. The officer on the phone sounded almost sympathetic. "Family fraud happens more than people think," he said. "It's still theft." I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, letting the truth sink in. My family had stolen from me before, but this time I had proof. And this time I wasn't going to cover it up. I didn't plan to see them again so soon, but by Saturday morning my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree: texts, missed calls, voicemails from Mom, Dad, Ethan, even Laura. The messages swung from guilt to rage. "You ruined everything. How could you humiliate your mother like this? We're family, Emma. Don't do this." I ignored them all, but when my doorbell rang around noon, I knew exactly who it was before I even looked through the peephole. My father stood there in his pressed gray suit, holding himself like a man who thought appearances could still win wars. Behind him, Mom clutched her purse like a prop. I opened the door just enough to see their faces. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "We need to talk," Dad said firmly, trying to push the door open further. I blocked it with my arm. "About what? The theft or the lies?" His jaw tightened. "You make it sound like a crime." "It is," I said. "Using someone's credit card without consent, accessing their email, filing charges under their name." "Don't throw legal words at me," he snapped. "We're family. Families help each other." "No," I replied calmly. "Families ask." Mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, please, this has gotten out of hand. Your father didn't mean for things to go this way. Didn't mean to spend $3,200 using my name," I asked. "Or didn't mean to get caught." She winced like I'd slapped her. "You know he has back problems. The business class tickets were for his health." "Then he should have used his own card," I said. "Or better yet, stayed home." Dad's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping low. "You're really going to throw your family under the bus for a few $1,000s, after all we've done for you?" "Done for me," I repeated, my laugh sharp and hollow. "You mean the years of control, the guilt trips, the manipulation, the education I paid for myself, the housework I did while Ethan lived rent-free. Yeah, I remember all you've done." His mask cracked. "Watch your tone," he hissed. "You've forgotten your place." "No," I said. "I finally remembered it." "And it's not beneath you anymore." The air in the hallway thickened. For a second, I thought he might actually raise his hand. Instead, he stepped closer until I could smell the faint scent of his aftershave, clean, sharp, suffocating. "If you file that report," he said quietly, "you won't have a family left." I met his eyes. Then I guess I never really had one. I lifted my phone slowly, pressing the screen. The faint red circle blinked. "You're recording this," he barked. "Yes," I said, "just in case you forget what you said." His face turned crimson, veins pulsing in his neck. Mom gasped, clutching his arm. "Charles, please." He jerked away from her, glaring at me one last time. "You're no daughter of mine," he spat before storming down the hallway. The echo of his footsteps faded, leaving silence so heavy it hurt to breathe. Mom lingered a moment longer, her eyes wet. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "You could have just let it go. I've been letting it go my entire life," I said softly. "And where has that gotten me?" She didn't answer. She just turned and followed him, her heels clicking against the floor like a clock counting down to something inevitable. When the door shut behind them, I leaned against the wall, trembling not from fear, but from release. For the first time in years, I wasn't the obedient daughter or the emotional accountant trying to balance other people's debts. I was just a woman who had finally decided that peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's captivity. That night, I replayed the recording. His words echoed back clear and damning. And as I listened, something inside me shifted, not grief, not anger, but something sharper. Resolve, the kind that doesn't fade when the lights go out. By Monday afternoon, the situation had exploded beyond anything I could have imagined. Mom sent out a mass text inviting the entire extended family to an urgent family meeting at my aunt's house. The message read like a press release. "There's been a misunderstanding. We must all come together and clear things up. Love, Mom." I almost laughed. In her world, theft was a misunderstanding. Lies were miscommunication and control was love. I wasn't going to go, but then Ethan texted me. "You need to come. Please, I know you're right." That was new. My brother, the golden boy, was asking for my presence, not demanding it. So I went. Aunt Susan's living room looked like a courtroom when I arrived. Everyone was already there. Mom, Dad, Ethan, his fiancée, Laura Cousins, and even Grandma, who sat on the couch with her cane. I stood in the doorway, their faces turning toward me like a jury preparing to judge. Mom was standing front and center, eyes red tissues clutched dramatically in her hand. Dad stood behind her arms, crossed like a general guarding his reputation. "Emma," Mom began, her voice trembling. "Thank you for coming. We're all very hurt by what's been said. This situation has caused unnecessary tension." "You mean because you stole from me?" I replied, my tone steady. Gasps rippled across the room. Mom's face twisted into practiced shock. "Emma, that's not fair. You offered to help remember. Maybe you forgot." There it was, the gaslight, the line she'd used all my life to make truth sound like confusion. "I didn't forget," I said. "I have the receipts, the emails, the bank logs, and the police report." The air shifted instantly. Dad's eyes darkened. "You filed a report?" "Of course I did," I said. "Someone used my financial information without consent. That's a crime whether or not you share DNA." Aunt Susan tried to intervene. "Emma, maybe you should lower your voice." "We don't air family issues like this. That's how you've all survived," I said, scanning the room. "You don't air anything. You bury it under politeness until someone else bleeds for it." Grandma frowned. "Your mother told us you've been under a lot of stress lately. She said your memory's been slipping." My chest went cold. I looked straight at Mom. "You told them I was mentally unstable." She didn't flinch. "Sweetheart, I just didn't want people to judge you harshly. You've been so anxious lately. Sometimes you remember things differently." That was it, the same tactic she'd used when I was a kid, rewriting reality until I questioned my own mind. But this time she didn't realize I'd come prepared. "I remember perfectly," I said, pulling my phone from my bag. I pressed play. Dad's voice filled the room, recorded crystal clear. "We were going to tell you after. Your mother thought you'd be more agreeable once everything was booked." The room went dead silent. Every lie they'd built their defense on evaporated in seconds. Grandma covered her mouth. Ethan's eyes widened. "Dad, you said enough," Dad snapped. "That recording means nothing. It means everything I said. It proves this wasn't an accident or confusion. It was planned." Ethan stood up slowly. "She's telling the truth," he said. "They did the same thing to me, used my card last year for an emergency. It wrecked my credit." Mom spun toward him. "Ethan, don't start." "No," he said, voice rising. "I'm done covering for you." Then Laura spoke up. "They used mine too, for the deposit on your parents' trip to California." The room turned to Mom and Dad like a wave. Cousins whispered. Aunt Susan muttered, "Oh my God!" Grandma's hand shook as she gripped her cane. "Margaret, Charles, is this true? Mom broke first. We just needed a little help," she cried. "We always meant to pay it back." Dad growled, "Don't act like we're criminals. We did what we had to for this family." "No," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "You did what you had to for control." The silence after that was heavy. Years of manipulation collapsing in real time. Grandma's voice trembled. "Emma." "I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I nodded though my throat tightened. "You weren't supposed to know. That's how they kept everyone in line." Dad glared at me, his power finally slipping. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I met his eyes. "Maybe, but at least I'll regret it in peace." The next few days felt like living inside a storm that refused to move on. Word about the family meeting spread faster than wildfire in a dry field. By Tuesday morning, my phone was flooded with calls from relatives, some offering quiet support, others condemning me for humiliating my parents. Aunt Susan texted, "You could have handled this privately." Cousin Janet sent, "It's brave what you did. Don't let them guilt you." Grandma left a voicemail that made me cry halfway through. "You did what none of us had the strength to do, sweetheart. Maybe now the truth can breathe." But my parents, they went silent. That was scarier than their anger. Silence from my father was never peace. It was the sound of calculation. I found out 2 days later what he'd been planning. An email arrived from his attorney. The subject line, "Cease and desist." I opened it, my pulse quickening. The letter accused me of defamation, claiming I had damaged the family's reputation with false statements. My first instinct was panic. Old habits of obedience die hard. But then I read the last paragraph. "Any further public discussion of alleged misconduct will result in legal action." I almost laughed. He was bluffing, but it was the kind of bluff that once would have scared me into silence. Not this time. I forwarded it to my lawyer, Erica, who called within the hour. "Classic intimidation," she said. "You did nothing wrong. The recording alone makes their claims useless." "He's trying to scare me," I said quietly. "He's always tried to scare you," she corrected. "The difference is you're not scared anymore." Her words steadied me. I wasn't the trembling girl who once begged for approval. I was a woman with evidence boundaries and finally the law on her side. Erica advised sending a formal response, not to escalate, but to set firm limits. "Your parents need to understand that their era of control is over," she said. "Boundaries mean consequences." We drafted a reply together. It was short, professional, and devastatingly clear. All allegations are false. Further contact outside legal counsel will be considered harassment. We sent it that same day. Within hours, my father called. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're destroying this family." "No," I replied evenly. "I'm saving myself from it." "You'll regret this," he growled. "You're alone now." "Then alone is better than used," I said and hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. The weight of years pressed against me, decades of being the peacekeeper, the good daughter, the fixer. It felt strange, almost foreign, to live without their approval. But under that strangeness was something fierce and bright freedom. By the end of the week, Ethan called. "They're losing it," he said. "Mom's been calling everyone trying to spin it as a misunderstanding. Dad's furious you went legal." "I had to," I said. "If I didn't, it would never end." There was a long pause, then he said quietly, "You were right. I should have said something sooner." His voice cracked. "They used my account again last month. I just didn't want to admit it." For the first time, I didn't feel angry at him. Just sad. We'd both been raised in the same cage, trained to keep it polished. The only difference was that I'd finally walked out. Over the next few weeks, the fallout deepened. Mom's social media posts grew cryptic Bible verses about forgiveness, vague complaints about betrayal. Friends and neighbors started asking questions. Aunt Susan stopped defending them when she found out her own name had been used on a canceled hotel booking. Slowly, the illusion began to crumble. Their reputation, the thing my father had worshipped like a god, was collapsing. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt something close to peace. But peace, I learned, doesn't mean quiet. It means finally hearing your own voice without their echo. And as that silence settled around me, I realized the storm hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed what I'd always been: stronger than their lies, louder than their shame, and finally free from a debt I never owed. The weeks that followed were strange, almost weightless. For the first time in years, there were no demands waiting in my inbox. No guilt-laced messages to decode, no sudden phone calls that made my stomach twist. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a windowless room, everything too bright, too quiet, too fragile. I spent the first few days just breathing, rediscovering small joys I'd forgotten how to feel. Waking up without dread, cooking dinner without flinching at every notification, sitting on my balcony at night watching the city lights flicker like tiny promises of peace. It wasn't happiness yet, but it was space, and that was enough. I began therapy again this time, not to survive, but to heal. Dr. Keller, my therapist, listened as I told her everything: the theft, the confrontation, the recording, the meeting, the fallout. She didn't look surprised. "What you experienced wasn't just financial abuse," she said gently. "It was emotional enslavement. They made you believe that your worth depended on your usefulness, and the moment you stopped serving them, they punished you for it." The word enslavement hit me hard, but it fit too perfectly to deny. I had spent my entire life being the family accountant, the emotional mediator, the fixer of everything broken except myself. Now, for the first time, I was learning how to stop fixing and start living. Part of that healing meant confronting my own guilt. I kept wondering if I'd gone too far, if maybe I'd destroyed my family beyond repair. But Dr. Keller would remind me, "You didn't destroy anything, you revealed it. You can't burn down a house that was already on fire." Those words became my anchor whenever the guilt crept back in. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from Ethan. The subject line simply said I paid off my debt. Attached was a photo of a letter from his bank. His credit finally cleared his name, free of the damage our parents had caused. "You gave me the courage to fix it," he wrote. "I'm proud of you." It was the first time in my life my brother had said those words to me. I cried quietly at my desk, the kind of tears that cleanse rather than wound. In time, others in the family started reaching out too. My cousin Laura messaged to say she'd opened her own account separate from her husband's family business. Aunt Susan sent a short note. "You made me look at my own marriage differently." Even Grandma wrote a shaky letter in her careful handwriting. "I don't understand everything that happened, but I believe you did the right thing. I wish I had been braver when I was your age." Those words meant more than any apology from my parents ever could. I never heard from Dad again. The man who once spoke in orders now spoke in silence. Mom sent one final message, a carefully crafted paragraph full of half-truths and soft blame. "We never meant to hurt you. Your father is not well. I hope someday you can forgive us." I didn't respond. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't about letting someone back in. It was about letting yourself walk away. I poured my energy into rebuilding. I took financial abuse recovery courses online, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to understand how to help others who'd lived what I had. I joined a support group for adult children of toxic parents. In that circle of strangers, I found something I'd never had in my own family: unconditional empathy. We shared stories of control guilt and small acts of rebellion that grew into freedom, and in every voice I heard echoes of my own. One evening during group, someone asked, "When did you know you were finally free?" I thought about it long and hard before answering. When their silence stopped feeling like punishment, I said, and started feeling like peace. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like understanding. I walked home that night under a clear sky, the air cool against my skin, my heart steady. I knew I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could choose how the story ended. And this time, I was writing it on my own terms, with no debts, no shame, and no signatures that weren't mine. 6 months later, the world looked completely different. The New York trip that started it all never happened. The hotel bookings had been canceled, the flights refunded, and the family chat, once buzzing with fake affection, had gone silent. My parents had become ghosts of their own making, living in the ruins of the image they built for decades. Their friends stopped calling. Their church circles grew distant. In a town obsessed with appearances, their fall from grace was both tragic and poetic. For years, they'd taught me that family meant obedience and that money meant power. Now I was watching both of those beliefs collapse under their own weight. It wasn't revenge. It was math actions plus consequences equals truth. I had been invited to speak at a local financial empowerment seminar, a small community event about recovering from financial manipulation. I almost declined, worried it would feel self-indulgent, but when the organizer said, "People need to hear stories like yours," I agreed. Standing in front of that audience, mostly women in their 40s and 50s, some teary-eyed, some nodding quietly, I realized this was the closure I hadn't known I needed. I told them how it started with small favors, how guilt disguised itself as love, how silence became the leash they pulled until I could barely breathe. When you grow up in a family where control is disguised as care, I said you learn to apologize for having boundaries. You learn to say sorry for protecting yourself. But the truth is, love without respect is not love, it's ownership. A woman in the front row whispered, "Yes," her hand trembling. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone in my story. After the seminar, a man approached me, gray hair, kind eyes. He said his daughter hadn't spoken to him in 3 years because of money disputes. "Listening to you," he said softly, "I realized I did to her what your father did to you. I thought I was helping. I was controlling." His voice cracked. "I'm going to call her tonight." That moment, the way he said it, the tears he didn't hide, felt like justice. Not courtroom justice, not vengeance, but moral justice. The kind that ripples outward, healing people you'll never meet. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, neat, delicate, controlled. My mother. I almost threw it away, but something stopped me. Inside was a single page. "Emma," it began, "your father had a minor heart attack last month. He's recovering, but he's different now. Quieter. I think he finally understands what he's done. I won't ask you to come, but I wanted you to know. I'm sorry for everything. Truly. I see now that I raised you to survive, not to live. You deserved better from us. There was no manipulation this time, no veiled guilt. Just sadness." For the first time in my life, I believed she meant it. I didn't write back, but I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a box with old photos proof that even the worst stories can have a soft ending if you let them breathe. By summer, I had rebuilt my life on a foundation of boundaries, therapy, and self-respect. My credit was flawless again. I had savings that no one could touch. I'd started teaching financial literacy at local schools, volunteering every other weekend to help young adults, especially girls, understand money as freedom, not obligation. One student, a shy 16-year-old named Lily, asked me after class, "How did you know when to stop forgiving?" I smiled. When forgiveness started costing me more than peace. She nodded slowly, and I saw a familiar spark in her eyes, the same one I'd felt the night I left home at 18. Ethan and I met for brunch every other Sunday now. He was rebuilding too, paying off debts, seeing a therapist, talking about boundaries like they were survival tools instead of rebellion. "You were right," he told me one morning over coffee. "Dad's not the same. He barely speaks to anyone. I think losing control broke him." I stirred my coffee thinking about that word, control. "Maybe that's what justice looks like," I said. "Not revenge, just truth finally catching up." He smiled. "And Mom?" "She writes sometimes. I read them, but I don't reply." "You think she regrets it?" "I think she regrets not stopping him," I said. "And that's a different kind of pain." We sat there in silence for a while, not out of discomfort, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing closure and start accepting truth. That night, I went home, opened my window, and let the cool Denver air fill my apartment. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who used to measure her worth in obedience and her love in sacrifice. I wished I could tell her that she didn't need to earn respect, that her voice was valid even when it shook. I wished I could tell her that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors you finally learn to lock from the inside. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed with a message from my support group. Tonight's topic, freedom after financial abuse. I typed back, "I'll be there." Then I looked out at the city lights one last time and whispered, Dad was right about one thing. Family does come first, but only when it acts like one. For the first time, that thought didn't hurt. It felt like healing. Real healing, the kind that doesn't erase the scars but turns them into proof that survival isn't just possible, it's beautiful.